With Twist TV, and I'm back with another video, y'all. I don't know if y'all watched this and peep game on this meeting that was done with Trump. This is for educational purpose only. In no way am I stealing these people content. We're just doing commentary on it. You can go check out their BB Boy reactions, their channel, whatnot, whatever. Shout them out or whatever. I just wanted to react to this real quick.
And I'm going to highlight some of those issues that they said you must agree to if you are going to be. Africa comes together as a continent speaking with one voice, one continent, one people. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing is going to change. As individual little African countries, we are wannabe boxers. We will never make it fighting against the heavyweights. We must speak with one voice. And this is exactly...
Amen.
This is exactly what our Pan-African leaders wanted to see happen in 1963 when they came together in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. They clearly stated that Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and that African Union was now. They said Africa must speak with one voice. It is the only way for Africa to take its rightful place on the world stage. Sadly, when they went to Addis Ababa in 1963, they were divided. We had two factions, the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. The Casablanca group were saying Africa for only 7. The other 25 of the 32 who attended were the Monrovia group. They were the nationalists. They said, let's go slow. Let's kind of wait on this Pan-African thing. 55 years later, 56 this year, we're still going slow. As if it wasn't bad enough that we were divided up into the tiny little countries that we are today. The gift that Berlin Conference gave us. One other thing that France did between 1958 and 1961 in the name of giving us our independence as African countries. France forced the Francophone, and I hate that terminology. There is no such thing as Francophone, Anglophone. They made it up. But for the purposes of communication, I will use that. 14 of those countries, they said, in order for you to get your independence from us, you must sign this document.
Right.
You thought they could have found a better name for the document.
So I wanted to touch base on that topic because right now this is they don't ever threaten Black Americans again. Now I wanted to do this video not as a divide, but just to each one teach one, right? Because education is key. Now, I'm with camaraderie. I'm with working with anybody and everybody. If African people want to come together with us so-called brown people in America, us Americans, and they want to get together and they want to protect each other in our country and protect each other in theirs, I'm down, right? Because we understand that there's a power that be that strongly fights against us. But I like what she was saying when she was talking about when colonizing. Now I want to get clarity on who people are, because I like timelines that she gave. In the 1840s, 50s and stuff, this was the era of Reconstruction. This was during the time that white people had gained a foothold, right? Because these people were slaves. I do not want people to get things twisted in America. White people were not colonizers. They were not the colonizers. The original, I always refer to this book. Go read Benjamin Franklin's Book of Mankind, where he lets you know all these nations used to be brown-skinned folk, and no, they did not change their hue. But with, y'all heard of paper genocide, with the moving of the hand, people stole other people's identity. And how they do this, if I am now calling you an all free person, free man, people of color, Negro, colored, Black, right? These are not nations, but some are not even hues of complexions. They're social statuses, right? Because we're talking about a caste system, Black being poor, white being wealthy, right? And we're talking about interchangeably using these caste systems as meaning hues of complexion. With that being said, when you give these titles, right, these fictitious titles now erase away your nationality, right? So now if you were ever a brown-skinned man from France, you're no longer considered French. They call you black. If you are a brown-skinned person from Scotland, they don't call you Scottish no more. They don't call you Irish. They say that you are black. This was how, in the Reconstruction era, they wrote away the nationality of brown-skinned people and grouped them all together to be in a continent in which none of them came from, which is Africa. Right? So I wanted to just give you basis. Now I gave you the basis. Now if you don't know, that mean that some of y'all so-called black folk that think that y'all African or think because you light skin, you got European ancestry, false. Because if you know anything about genetics, you know that having a pale hue of complexion has nothing to do with a race or a nationality, right? Just white people weren't always called Europeans. They weren't always called Scottish, Irish, French, German, right? Those terms were not, they were called Slavics. You can look it up. They were Slavic people. They were not ever German, French, Spanish, Italian. Any of those terms they call in themselves, that was to gain footing when they were impoverished Slavic slaves brought to the Americas as indentured and slaves. That's it. Orphan trained babies. And the Ottoman slave trade is what started their slavery. From the year 700, they'll say BC, whatever, to 1865 when slavery was abolished in America. And that is to put a perspective on who they really were in the 1800s. Okay? They did not have the power prior to that. So what they did was they devised gangs such as the KKK, right? These were formed so that they can gain a footing. And they did this nationwide, right? So that they overthrew every brown skin, or if you want to say black, nation across the globe, where they would come in, make a lie, burn up a town, lynch people, and after they were done, what they did not pillage, they robbed and stole, right? And then they placed their name and identity, their name on it. So if Robert Durst, right, was a brown-skinned man who was wealthy and owned cotton gins throughout America, they would kill Robert Durst, lynch him, run his family off the land, and steal all of his stuff. Now, Robert Durst, being a dark-skinned man who was a French man who allied with the American Indians, and as a result, they build a whole thing together. Him and his family now own that land and are mixed Indian, brown-skinned folk, right? And the Indians were brown-skinned too, right? And so they would come together and build infrastructures, businesses, and buildings. And they would classify themselves as white. Not that their hue was white, their social status was white. Because again, these were social statuses, white and black. Black meaning that you were poor or a peasant. You can be any shade of complexion and be a peasant and be poor, right? Because you could have came as an indentured servant due to you being a criminal, right? We understand that slavery was practiced before time, and it wasn't always how the Europeans the Spanish started it off, right? Well, nevertheless, yes, it was. They conquered the people, enslaved them, made them work. Nevertheless, going back to what I was saying, but this is what white people did. Because these people were classified as white, they used certain systems such as the 1924 Racial Integrity Act as a way to see, no, this man right here is white, meaning pale skin. No, he wasn't. I'm just giving the name Robert Durst. He was a brown-skinned man who owned all this stuff. But now when you call, his social status was white, but he was French, right? But white people created these laws, such as the Racial Integrity Act, to now make that interchangeably mean pale in complexion. Do y'all understand now how they got the land? Am I breaking this down for understanding? So this is what they started doing all throughout the globe. This is how they stole, and this is mainly how they did it in North and South America and Canada. And so So when we're talking about colonization, every time we sign, to me, this is what came to me. I'm telling you, I don't know why it came to me. So I can only say it's the Holy Ghost. He'll give you insight and then follow up. Anytime we vote, we don't know what voting is. They make you think that every time you vote, you are voting for the betterment. You are voting for a representative who is going to represent you and your home in the desired things that you want for your household and your family, and the government to do for them. But what if you were in fact voting to keep the remaining provisions prevailing, meaning you're keeping a system going that does not benefit you? And we've seen this time and time again where we vote and who wins? Remember what Biden said, we the people, the government. Yeah, do you not understand that voting, and this African woman is telling you that they're making you sign a treaty every year to keep you under colonization? What if that's what voting is doing? And why they fight so hard? You may not know who you are. That doesn't mean the power that be, like Cat Williams was saying. You may not know your identity, but that doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't. So they fight so hard for you to vote because every time you sign on that dotted line, the majority of you are signing that you keep the remaining provisions prevailing, meaning you're keeping a system that doesn't work for you in power. You're keeping a system that they orchestrated to keep you low at the bottom of the barrel. They're keeping you colonized. That is what she's letting you know. And every time you vote, you stay colonized. You are not an African. You are an American Indian. That's why when you find everybody, even like right now I'm in Florida, you know that this state was owned by a so-called black man. And again, if you look back at the 1924 Racial Integrity Act, it lets you know, and there was a 1824 one as well. These classifications are fictitious. They erase away one's nationality. Right? Because this man was probably an American Indian. In Long Island, I didn't upload the video yet, but it's coming, of this Sister Indian man whom everybody said was a black man, even on a plaque. And he was a Sister Indian. I'm probably saying it wrong, but that's the Indian that he was over in Long Island. And he owned 50 acres of land that is now owned by white people. Right? So I want y'all to get into a perspective of what truly happened during the time of the 1800s. White people, in 1865, slavery was abolished. You had these different surges of white people coming all throughout different parts of the world, revolting. Right? And when they got into powers with their militias, burning down towns, lynching and killing people, they stole. Not only did they steal land, they stole identity, they stole cultures, and then they turned around and erased the original inhabitants' culture and identity and gave them a new one. And that's why we call African American in 1988, and then prior to that, black, color, and Negro, due to the Racial Integrity Act. And prior to that was a treaty in 1824 or something like that, where we were called free people of color, all else free men and all that. That erases your nationality. Because these are not nations, right? These are terms and social statuses, and not even real hues of complexion, because nobody's black, but you get me? So we got to be careful when we are addressing history based on hues of complexion. And we got to be careful about the history that's given even by politicians. Because like I said, a lot of them are informed the same way I didn't say that in this video, but I will say it again. I said it in a previous video. We are informed by a system that, again, when we vote, we sign off to keep that, like Senator Benson, after calling black people Aboriginal, they say and they had to make sure African American. We weren't African American until 1988. My mother was born in 1949, sir. And her mother was born in 1929. And her mother was born in 1901. And then her mother here in America was born in 1890, about 1880, and then keep going and we keep going. Our plaques and our burial ground and our family burial, it keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. And all those people that are supposed to be African are sitting right here in American soil, right? And it's recorded. Right? So you got to be careful the information, because they're given the same compulsory education even in Africa, right? That's why they send the missionaries to tell them about slavery that didn't exist, the African slave trade that didn't exist in America. There was a slave trade, but it wasn't African, right? There were several, and I'm gonna give you all of them, right? The American Indian slave trade, the Chino slave trade when they went to the Manila, Philippines, and took all them Asians from Asia and brought them over to the Americas. The Slavic slave trade, where they took all them white people from Europe and the Caspian Sea and brung them over here, orphan trained babies. Then they started reproducing them in factories. You got your Cabbage Patch Kids, your orphan trained babies. Those are the 3 slaveries that went over here. But an African slave trade never took place in America. And if you're talking about them, they mixing up history, because you're talking about the exiles from Portugal and Spain that were shipped to Africa. Again, let's say that again. During the time of the Spanish Inquisition, when they were persecuting Hebrews, what did they do? They made those Portuguese and Spanish Hebrews, they kicked them out of Portugal and Spain, and who could not leave willfully because they didn't have enough money, was enslaved and shipped to Africa. When they found that those Portuguese and Spanish Hebrews continued practicing their Hebrew culture, they said, King George said, get them up out of Africa. Send them over there to the New World. They shipped them same Portuguese and Spanish exiles to the Americas. They never had African slaves. They had Portuguese and Spanish exile, and that was very few. The majority of the brown-skinned folk in America belong to America. That's it. And yes, exclusive of the brown skin, if you read Benjamin Franklin Book of Mankind, the brown skin French, European, Scottish, Irish, Swedes and Germans that came to America, who became allies with a lot of the American Indian and the European brown skin European, who made it in, and that's how they made this whole civilization, built it up, built the infrastructures, and ally in cahoot with the brown skin Indians, making black people wealthy and own everything in America, before the surge in the influx of white slaves came in and revolted during the time of the Reconstruction era, right? Or during the time of the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay? So y'all got to be careful the history that y'all learning, because white people will make you think they were the owners and we were the slaves, and that was not so. They were slaves fighting for freedom. I always say, and I laughed about this with somebody I was talking to, was Harriet Tubman even a black woman? Be careful the history you learn from, no disrespect, white folk, because it's a lie a lot of the time. It's a lie all the time. Okay? And I read enough books to substantiate y'all can read about the Ottoman slave trade. You can find the peon slaves who were there. They were not called European, Scottish, Irish, German, French, Swedish, none of that, Italian. They were Slavics. Before they got those titles, the reason why they gave themselves those titles was to no longer be enslaved, right? That is why, right? They had to, you see it in The Godfather. It's a Godfather where they show you where they changing their names. That was for social status. They did not come over here owning no African slaves, beating and whipping you. On the contrary, that was them being beaten and whipped. They were in the Ottoman slave trade from the year 800 to 1865 when slavery was abolished in America. How can they ever own your ancestors when they were slaves themselves? They were brought over as orphan trained babies. Majority of white folk can trace themselves back to an orphan trained baby, or an incubation baby, or some Slavic nation from the Ukraine or Russia or Austria. I bet my life on it. All of those people were enslaved by the Iberians, the Arabics, the Africans, and some English. The Ottoman slave trade went on for years. They were selling men, women, children, boys, and girls. The Cabbage Patch Kids. I'm telling you, that's where that came from. You see old advertisements, right? Don't let them fool you. They did not own you. You owned everything in America. That's why if you trace American history back, like I said, I'm sitting in Florida. Who owned this land at first in Florida? A brown-skinned man. What happened? I guarantee you, he was lynched. He was murdered. All his stuff was taxed out, and it was stolen by a white Slavic who got empowered through the KKK. This was after Reconstruction. Not only did they kill you via physically, they also erased your identity using paper genocide. When they took on being French, German, European, Scottish, Irish, they robbed us from that. Because these, if you read the Book of Mankind, Benjamin Franklin book, these nations were brown skinned, dark, swarthy, tawny, copper colored people. What happened? Well, I know that your phenotype and hue of complexion don't change in less than 100 years. So what happened? Paper genocide happened. So all these races that's calling themselves these different names is a lie. They were Slavics first. You can Google search can teach you this. But if you want some in-depth books, there are a lot of books that will show you who these people really are, right? They tell you one thing, but it's not true. And it's fictitious because of their own shame of where they came from. You know, most people like the rag to riches story, but when you have been treacherous to get it, one can't celebrate the way one would desire to, if that makes sense. Nobody's hating on them. This is not said out of disrespect. It's a each one teach one moment. I love white people. I've talked with white people, this information that I'm giving you, and baby, they love it. And I remember one lady I work with, she was like, why don't you do genealogical research for people? She was like, I would love to find out where I come from. She said, I'm gonna be honest with you, I know this information is true. She said, because my family comes from Austria. She had no problem with what I was saying. She already knew. And all I try to do is educate white folk and black folk so that they understand broadly what took place. This ain't hate. It's a each one teach one thing. I don't hate you because I share this information. It's the love for both of us that we need to get back to who we are and where we come from. Listen, things happen in life. I sin and fall short of God's glory. You sin and fall short of God's glory. I can't hold you because God says your murder is equivalent to it being in my heart. I don't hate you. I love you. And I love you enough to teach you the truth. This is Kendra with Truest TV. Like, share, and subscribe. Stay up, stay blessed. Put God first above all else. Peace out. Bye.